Today, we're diving into a medical drama that unfolds every single day inside ICUs all over the world. It's a story about incredibly powerful drugs, invisible killers, and a constant, high-stakes balancing act that doctors have to perform to save lives.
So put yourself in this situation for a second. Your patient is critically ill. Their body is shutting down. You know it's an infection, but you have no idea which one. You have to move, and you have to move fast, but you're fighting an enemy you literally can't see. That is the fundamental challenge of critical care. And when I say fast, I really mean it. For a patient in septic shock, the numbers are just terrifying. For every single hour you delay getting the right treatment, the risk of death goes up significantly. In the ICU, the clock isn't just ticking, it's your biggest adversary. Which brings us right to our first section, this desperate race against infection. Because when you don't know exactly who the enemy is, you can't use a targeted weapon. You have to go in with what amounts to overwhelming force. And that overwhelming force, it comes in the form of broad spectrum antibiotics. The best way to think about these is like the medical version of a carpet bomb. They're designed to attack a huge variety of different bacteria, which makes them absolutely essential as that first line of defense when time is everything.
But here's the thing. You can't just throw these powerful drugs at every problem. Using them requires a really specific strategy, a kind of philosophy. And in the ICU, they call it the golden rule.
Okay, so let's break this down, because this is the absolute heart of our story. It's a three-step dance. Step 1, start broad. You hit the infection hard and fast with one of those powerful antibiotics. Now, while that's happening, you're working on step 2, identify the pathogen. You're running lab cultures to figure out exactly what you're fighting. And then, once you know your enemy, you get to the most crucial step of all, de-escalate early. You switch from the big, broad weapon to a much more targeted, specific drug.
Now, to pull this strategy off, doctors have this whole arsenal of drugs at their disposal. And trust me, not all antibiotics are created equal. Let's just take a look at a few of the major players on the field.
So first up, you've got what a lot of ICU docs call the workhorse, something like piperacillin tazobactam. You can just see from its coverage there, it's incredibly versatile. It hits gram-positives, gram-negatives, anaerobes, the whole lot. That makes it a real go-to for really common but still very serious things like hospital-acquired infections.
But, for the most critical life or death situations, that's when you bring out the heavy artillery. These are the ICU big guns, drugs like meropenem. Their coverage is just ultra broad. They can even take out some of the more resistant bacteria out there, and that's exactly why they are reserved for the absolute sickest of the sick, patients in septic shock or with a really bad ventilator-associated pneumonia.
But it's not always about brute force. Sometimes you need a specialist, a sniper. And vancomycin is a perfect example. I mean, look at its profile. It doesn't have broad coverage at all. Nope. It basically has one main job, to fight very specific resistant gram-positive bacteria, most famously MRSA. You almost never use it by itself. Instead, you add it on to another broad-spectrum drug, just to make sure all your bases are covered.
So, we've got these incredible, life-saving drugs. Sounds great, right? But they are a massive double-edged sword. And this brings us to the danger that is lurking behind every single one of these prescriptions.
The more we use these incredible weapons, the more we risk creating an even bigger, scarier problem down the line. So what is the downside? What is the real price we pay for hitting these infections with everything we've got?
Well, the biggest danger is the evolution of superbugs. All this antibiotic use puts immense pressure on bacteria, and the ones that survive, they become resistant. The first big one we all heard about was MRSA, a kind of staph infection that became notoriously hard to kill. And then you have VRE, a bug that loves to infect hospital patients and can resist even some of our more specialized drugs.
And then there's the one that really keeps doctors up at night, CRE. This is a family of bacteria that's resistant to even our big gun carbapenem antibiotics. And that can leave doctors with very few or sometimes zero effective options left.
And look, the damage isn't just about creating some superbug of the future. For the patient right there in the bed, overuse can cause immediate collateral damage. We're talking about everything from severe C. diff diarrhea to nasty fungal infections and even serious kidney injury.
So how do we fight back? How do we possibly use these drugs without just fueling the fire of resistance? Well, this brings us to our final section, the strategy that's all about being smarter, narrower, and ultimately better.
This is where that golden rule comes roaring back into the picture. It's a practice called antimicrobial stewardship. Within 48 to 72 hours, doctors have to review those lab cultures. As soon as that specific organism is identified, they switch to a targeted, narrower antibiotic and stop any other drugs that are no longer necessary. It's all about being aggressive at the start, but incredibly disciplined later on.
There's this quote that just perfectly captures the entire philosophy here. Broad is for unstable patients, narrow is for stable brains. In other words, you use the big guns, the heavy hitters, to get the patient stable. But once the chaos has subsided, you have to use your brain, your clinical judgment, to make a smarter, more precise choice.
You know, when it comes down to it, it's a constant, delicate balance between saving a life that's in front of you today and preserving our ability to save lives tomorrow. Which kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. In this never-ending war against our microscopic enemies, is it possible that our most powerful drug isn't an antibiotic at all, but wisdom?